Oh, okay. Happy Tuesday, folks. Gonna do the usual. We'll babble a little. This will be, what? Not topical in the grand scheme of things. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how this is gonna go. So, yeah, it's gonna be a ride. But we'll let folks get in here. It's nice weather time. It's probably gonna be a lot less people than the usual, but still, give folks a few minutes. Get some YouTubes and notifications out there before we talk on topic. Let's see. I don't think there's anything outside of that topic I want to talk about as far as updates are concerned. There's not a lot. I've been okay. I can talk about one thing. So, my significant other, my lady, is eventually going to do some video game streaming, and so last week, part of the, I guess more of the weekend, did some stuff to help prep for that because she wants to have like a soundboard, and she's doing more of a like a VTuber thing for those who are familiar with that. And so I actually went back to my friend's place, which is Game Grotto Softworks. That's the video game that I worked on a couple of years ago, and I was back in a recording booth recording lines for her soundboard for her streams. So been a little busy with some projects, but yeah, I know this is gonna be a not great stream for a lot of people. A lot of people are gonna be real sad, and believe me, as sad as some of you folks are, it is nothing compared to my lady. My lady is like heartbroken. So, yeah, fun times had by all, he said with huge levels of sarcasm. So yeah, let me explain what happened. And I don't know precisely. So we got home from an appointment that we had, and I was coming up here to my bedroom where / office. I've often joked about a few things, but anyway, and I was coming up here to let Shantoto out, let this little doggy girl out because she'd been in her crate for a bit and she needed some time out and hang out and some love. And I was getting stuff ready for her, like, you know, getting her fresh water and food and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I got a phone call and could hear a kind of the only way to put it is panic scream from my girlfriend downstairs because she saw Danger Noodle laying on her side and not moving, which is not loaches typically don't kind of lay on their side, right? They lay on their stomach and they lay at some weird angles. They'll be like straight up sometimes. They do some weird funky stuff, and that's part of what makes them part of the appeal and weirdness to them that makes them such an enjoyable fish to keep. And I've only learned this after adopting Danger Noodle. So needless to say, like I ran downstairs and poor Pupper had to stay in her crate a little bit longer. And at that point, Danger Noodle was already gone. So there wasn't anything I could do at that point. It's not like it was a stress point and a disease. That's so the thing I did do, because this is like, well, I try not to tear up, but this is the part that I think is the both touching and sad part, is that the rest of the dojo loaches in the tank, Team Thick, especially the male, I noticed, were trying to like gently rub against Danger Noodle. And it's kind of similar. You'll see this with usually young animals with their parents. If their parents die for some reason, they'll try to basically wake them up and get them moving. And yeah, needless to say, like seeing that in a fish is something I've never seen before. And at first, my girlfriend was scared because she was worried they were like, when fish die, things like SAEs or your plecos or stuff, they're usually on the body trying to eat it, and she was worried that was what was going on. And then I told her to watch for a second because I was going to get a net to remove Danger Noodle because I'm not going to let other fish eat Danger Noodle's corpse. Danger Noodle was really important to my girlfriend. So needless to say, she was getting some special treatment, which is to say I buried her out by some rose bushes that I have in my house and kind of put a little temporary marker until I can get something different, something a little more permanent. But she watched, and even in the net, they were trying to come up and rub against her to try and get her to move. And that kind of made her feel a little better. You realize that it's not just us humans that get attached, right? There are types of fish, and loaches are one of them, where they're extremely social. And when they deal with loss, it can be very emotional, surprisingly. And yeah, and a lot of times, Adele mentions this, loaches kind of like play dead in a sense, or they'll just like lay there for a while being lazy, and they can give you heart attacks. And we've had a few of those, but I mean, this is very clearly her gone. So when I got her in the net and I was looking at her, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, which is, Danger Noodle's pretty active fish. And I noticed the fairly large bump kind of right behind her gill plate. So, on your fish, you have your gill plate. And I noticed kind of in the lower part, there was a big bump. And that was not present in any of the other ones. So I kind of, my thought, I'm certainly not an animal vet or any form, but my thought is that she might have developed some kind of tumor, and that might have finally been what caused her to pass. Because from everything I can see, she was eating regularly. She wasn't acting any different. She would she'd go hang and take naps in the Java fern. She loves doing that. And every once in a while, she'd be swimming all over the place, see little farts from her, all the usual Danger Noodle things. And we have emotes that are there for the members. Like there's this one here. I've just blown it up on my screen a lot bigger. But there's also another one that I had made because I only had so many emotes at the time. And I think now you guys have actually made it so that I had an extra one. And I don't know, I don't know how long it'll take to get that added or whatever, but, there's this too, which is, we almost actually made this piece of art, the hat for Triple Crown, but because the Triple Crown involves a bunch of rainbow fish people, I specifically chose a rainbow fish on it, and now I kind of regretted actually not putting Danger Noodle on it, but I have this beautiful piece of art that will be around for a long time. And we still have Team Thick. Like, let's be clear, I have 3 huge Dojo Loaches that are going to be around. And one of the promises I made to my lady a while ago, and I kind of reaffirmed it, is that whenever I can get the garage, it's a logistical nightmare is the easiest way to put it. But we're going to do similar to what I can't remember which farm tour has it, but there's one of the, I think it's Florida Fish Farms, where they have like a Dojo Loach touch tank. And basically I'm going to make a small indoor pond. I'll get one of those like 300-gallon things that Corey's shown several times, those big, huge totes. And it'll just be Danger Noodles as a little like touch pond for, us mostly, but if other people visit the house to enjoy. and that'll be kind of special just for my lady. And let Team Thick have a even newer house with some new friends. But yeah, it really sucked. This part of my last week. Like I said, I gave her something I wouldn't normally do with fish, which is a proper and full burial between a couple of rose bushes that are out my front door. So yeah, really tough week. It's one of those things where you don't realize how what seems like very silly things in your fish can give you a huge emotional attachment until you lose them. And for those that don't know, maybe you're around a little newer, you haven't seen the video, because the video's 3 years old now, I think. Danger Noodle was an adoptee. I got contacted randomly through OfferUp, of all places, back when I used to have an advertisement for selling plants, and it was a really old one that I'd forgot I even had up there. A guy who had his 75-gallon tank crack, and he was just looking for anyone local to take his fish so that they'd be okay. And that's how I ended up with Danger Noodle and all the cories that are in that tank, for the most part, too. There's a few other ones that come from other places that are in that tank now, but most of the cories were all from this particular person with Danger Noodle. So Danger Noodle used to be alone with a bunch of cories, and she would swim with the cories. It was kind of adorable. And then when we got Team Thick a few months ago from somebody who was moving out of state from my local club, it took a few days for her to warm up because she was a little smaller than all of them. But then you'd see all four of them hanging out together, and it was just one of the most adorable things. So it was kind of nice in that sense that before she passed, she had some friends and had a group of her own kind to hang out with and do silly Danger Noodle things. Yeah. So that's my week. That's why this stream's a little weird and different. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who will be like, who cares? But for you in chat, thank you. Lots of condolences. I greatly appreciate it. It's certainly harder on my lady than myself, but eventually we will get other Danger Noodles to go with Team Thick, and then they'll get to live out their lives as best I can give to them. Because I've come to appreciate that fish a lot more than I ever thought I would. A lot more, because they're just such a unique and interesting thing. And that's kind of loaches in general, but dojo loaches especially are something else. I'm curious if rope fish are semi-similar, just because you've got people like Haley who love rope fish, right? Oddball Aquatics, for those who maybe know your YouTube names better than first names, but yeah. Thanks, Eric Wyrock, for the Danger Noodle Memorial Fund. I'll have to do something, I guess, to more immortalize Danger Noodle in some way, shape, or form, but yeah. Thank you. Let me get, there's a couple comments, questions, and some other random things. I mean, just tons of you folks being super, super sweet about Danger Noodle, and yeah, I greatly appreciate those. Mrs. Buttersworth, let me answer your question real fast. Quick question: how important is it to have a check valve on the CO2 line? So some it is and it isn't. Usually, I prefer to buy the diffusers that have built-in check valves, because the difference in cost is like a few dollars usually. But if you're doing something like a reactor or something like that, then yes, I would do a check valve, just because what you don't want to happen is to cause some level of back pressure when the solenoid turns off, and to have water go up the tube toward the solenoid. That's really all it is. You want the check valve in there basically just to protect your solenoid on your regulator. Other than that, it's not terrible, because you're not putting CO2, usually we're not putting as much at the rate like we are air, so the likelihood of creating those kind of back pressures is extremely low, and you're not going to like drain your tank, because it's also going through most of our diffusers and stuff. They're much more fine pores than something like an air stone, so you're a little less likely to encounter major problems. But Mostly you just do it as a safety measure to protect your regulator and solenoid, because you don't want a bunch of water somehow getting up in there, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's pretty minor. I just, for my atomic diffusers that I buy the ones with the built-in check valves, and then most of the inline diffusers have built-in check valves as well. And you can build one in if you build your own DIY reactor too. It doesn't take very much to do that. You can use a pretty standard check valve, or just your line that's going in, put a check valve right in front of the reactor, and you're fine. It's pretty easy peasy. Farron found a fix to a planaria problem in your shrimp tank. Yeah, I know you were talking about the medications you couldn't use because you were worried about risking the shrimp. I've been so behind. Part of losing Danger Noodle and some other things have put me still behind on email, which I feel kind of terrible for. There's a few fast emails I answered, but I've got some stuff I have to get through very, very soon because I'm kicking myself for being as behind as I am because I hate being that far behind, especially considering I'm supposed to have more time for doing this kind of stuff with my new job, even though I've been trying to catch up on a lot of stuff around the house that I've let get like way behind. But yeah. Alyssa, hopefully they have TV on the other side. I am confident that Danger Noodle will go to a special place where she will get to enjoy all the Gordon Ramsay she could ever want to watch. For those who don't know, maybe if you're a little newer, Danger Noodle, my dojo loach, would watch Gordon Ramsay. We would put Gordon Ramsay shows on TV. My girlfriend and I love all the Gordon Ramsay stuff. And if you could tell, if Danger Noodle knew Gordon Ramsay was on, and it was newer, especially if it was a new thing, something that hadn't been on a lot, Danger Noodle would go to this corner of the tank that's right in front of the TV and just lay there and watch. It's kind of adorable. There's a few pictures on my Instagram where, like, you can see Danger Noodle in her little spot, while, like, you can see the glare of the TV, and the TV's at an angle. My girlfriend caught one where it's literally watching, I think it was, like, Kitchen Nightmares. It's just... It's kind of hilarious that fish, and we'd watch other TV, and you'd never see her in the same spot unless it was Gordon Ramsay on TV, which I think is about the funniest thing in the world. It's just like, we even at one point on Instagram, I tried to tag, now granted, like, Gordon Ramsay's Instagram account is ran by some other random person, but we tagged that account because we thought it was funny. The silly things our fish do, man. Mr. Littles, welcome back to Auto Sinkless, or for the first time. I thought you had been before. It's interesting. Maybe re-upped. I don't know. So yeah, from here, we'll do question and answer stuff. So if you have questions, the easiest way for me to see them at Bentley Pasco. That makes it easy for me to see stuff, like Chance just did right there. So from Chance Larson, what would you use as a diffuser on a DIY yeast CO2 setup? Good question. So there's two options, and what I would say is it depends on how big your DIY system is. I would honestly just use one of... Does Co-op still sell that little diffuser they had? Because I would use that one. You're not going to create enough pressure to use something like an atomic diffuser, because really you need to be getting to something like 35 psi for that. And yeah, for those who are just showing in, you missed the intro, but yeah, unfortunately we lost Danger Noodle. In my best estimation, looking at her afterward, because I didn't see any injuries or any indications of illness, although it did look like she had a bulge in a portion of her body that has looked similar to where I've seen tumors on rainbow fish before. So my best estimation is something like a tumor, most likely. I want to see if they still have the diffuser. Yeah, here we go. So, like, I would use... And this is just a link to make it easy, but Aquarium Co-op has their little Neo diffuser. I would use something close to this. I mean, there's a lot of brands that make these. You don't have to specifically have the Aquarium Co-op one, but just this will give you a visual of what you're looking for. These typically don't need a huge amount of pressure to function, but they give you a good mist. The other thing that I would look for actually, and this is a little different, but you could basically reload what's called a CO2 ladder. Let me excuse me. I'm trying to find one on like Amazon just to make it easy. Dear work, find what I want. But you're not the part of work that I work for. Does that make sense? Oh, these... It's like somebody is giving me actual ladders and not like a CO2 ladder. Wow. You're killing me. Maybe I need to do it this way. Maybe if I do diffuser ladder instead of ladder diffuser. Not really. So any of those like glass or plastic style ones are going to be probably your best bet. I would not get what they call an atomizer or atomic diffuser. So I'll just give you a quick example. This is just an El Cheapo one that's on Amazon. Yes, it's a paid link. For FTC purposes, I am a affiliate of Amazon. And if you were to ever make a purchase through one of my links that qualifies, I do make a small commission to the channel. Blah, 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 FTC, please don't find me. But this is just to give you an example. These kind of atomic or what they'll sometimes call atomizers, these typically require at least 30, if not 35 PSI of pressure to work correctly, and you're not going to get that in DIY. So find like the kind of glass ones that have the little, whether it's wood or ceramic diffuser top to them. Sometimes they're made of plastic instead of glass, so they save you money that way, or they can be metal. Those are going to work good for you. There are these things called CO2 ladders. You can also do like an inline diffuser if you have a canister filter. That'll work too. They typically don't require anything too crazy to function correctly. But a CO2 ladder basically is like something where you pump the air and it moves like this up into the water, so it slowly gets absorbed better. You can do stuff like that too to work with DIY. That'd probably be your best bet. Just as a couple of examples, but do not use the atomic ones because they require a very specific air pressure. I know I said that like 3 or 4 times, but I want to really, really hit home on that because those basically have to be off of proper regulators at a certain amount of modifiable pressure or they don't function correctly. And that's a big thing. And I've seen people have trouble with them because they didn't know that in the past. Hope that helps. Mr. Chance. Okay, let's see. Okay, Leo209, a medication question. And you also have a super chat. I'll get to that in just a sec, too. How long after Canaplex or any medication expiration date is it safe or potent to use? This is a really good question. So there's kind of 2 things here. Each medication will lose potency over a different period of time. You can look a lot of this information up, although you're going to get the information based on human dosed medication, so your normal like pills, right? You have to forgive me. We're in the high pollen season, and apparently, as an older person, I have developed minor allergies because my sinuses go kind of bat-ass crazy, and I feel like I have a constant like runny nose this time of year. It drives me nuts. Anyway, so you can look up that information because all you're talking like Canaplex is just kanamycin, Neoplex is neomycin, and those are medications that we also use on people. You can find usually the farm grade versions of medication also should have that kind of information about their half-life and how they degrade over time. Usually, that medication still has some efficacy, so it's not going to be perfect, but it will still have some effect for at least a year after its expiration date. And then much past that, you kind of really fall off the cliff, so to speak. Each medication is a little different. So you want to kind of look those up, but you can find them online. Just do some simple Google searches. You'll find that kind of stuff. But in general, if you have a little bit of medication left and it's like within 2 years of its expiration date, it still has some efficacy, and you could probably still use it as like a lighter dose, if that makes sense, Leo. Okay. Jacob Hill. I have a potassium deficiency. Would C-Chem potassium work? Yeah, so that's actually the individual C-Chem, like potassium, nitrogen, and stuff like that. I actually like those products a lot more than like the whole line at Flourish, because you can dose that individual particular nutrient, and it will work fine. You could use C-Chem potassium. You could use, Brightwell has their potassium in their fluorine range as well. Very, very similar effect. Either works, whatever you can get your hands on. Just dose it according to its instructions on the bottle. And realistically, I would say dose it like once a week. That's really should be all you need. You don't need to dose it a lot, because if you're using another all-in-one on top of it, that will have a little bit of potassium in it, so you're just kind of boosting your potassium a little extra touch. All right. Mark, do you have any tips for doing water changes or gravel vacuuming for low-lying tanks? A Python is probably your best friend, but if you can get something like a small water pump that will attach to your tubing, so that is kind of a way to cheat. And one of the ways that you can cheat is you can basically put the pump down in the water, right? And use an intake. You could have a line on your intake and a line on your output. If you find the right pump, that's the big thing. And then have a little suction head. Just use a little line of tube so that you can vac in specific places. But other than that, just put a pump down in the water and power its way out like you would with a power head or something like that. A lot of people actually use like power head assisted pumps to do their water changing. And they just drop it in and move it tank to tank, and it makes it a lot easier. I just use your atypical hooks up to a kitchen sink Python. And I can get tanks that are low and high and usually have no problems with it, because it's creating its own natural vacuum. You're not reliant on a gravity vacuum to create the initial suction. Hope that makes it simple. And they're not terribly expensive. I mean, you can get a Python on Amazon for, depending on how big you want. I actually have to buy a new one, because that Higer one that I bought and did some testing on, the tube is just so naturally cheap. It's nice for a lot of stuff, but the tubing they use is a lot less quality. Oh man, Python's getting spendy. Although this is probably like a 50-footer, right? Yeah, that's why it's 50-foot. You got like a 25-foot Python. It costs you like $50. You'd be looking at something like this. Give you a quick link just to make it easy peasy. It's in chat. Make sure that the FTC knows. But yes, again, Amazon affiliate, blah, 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 blah. Don't find me. I get small amounts of commission if you make a purchase off this one thing. But there's a 25-foot Python. You can find smaller ones too. But I mean, 25-foot is kind of like the bare minimum you need if you're going to go from a sink to somewhere else, unless you got a utility sink or something in a fish room and things like that. But that's your best bet. Get something that's going to have some inherent power to it. All right, let me talk Leo 209's question. It's not fish, but it's interesting because it's vaguely related to the co-op and fish. Leo 209 is considering moving to Washington work-wise. Can go anywhere in the U.S. because he works for Costco. I love Costco. I was at Costco earlier today, actually. I had a bunch of stuff for my dogs I had to get, and they had one thing I didn't want. I like getting bully sticks for my dogs, and it has been a nightmare to get bully sticks from Costco in the Seattle area, because supply stuff or something or other, because they have like the best deal in the world when it comes to like good bully sticks pricing, if you like doing those for your pets. Anyway, what city would you recommend, especially for one near the co-op? Okay, so you don't want to be in the southern part of Seattle. You want to be more north. So the aquarium co-op store itself is in Edmonds, Washington, which is north of Seattle and just south of a major city called Linwood. So it is. I will warn you, it's a little expensive to live in those areas, but Linwood, Everett, if you're going to start going further and further north, as a heads up, but these are all places with Costco's at them. Marysville, that's all great. You can go, I mean, you could try something like Kirkland, which is where I grew up, but it's really expensive to live in that area because you've got a lot of people that work at Microsoft there, or like Redmond or Bellevue, stuff like that. That's the super expensive area. You get the same problem kind of in Seattle proper itself, but Linwood's probably like one of your best bets anywhere around that area. Is going to put you really close to the co-op. Now, if you don't mind driving a little bit, then you got a lot of options, because if you just choose your hours correctly, like you go earlier in the morning when they first open up, or you try to go later in the day toward the end of the day when traffic's a little lighter, you can be in other places and the drive's not so bad. But if you're trying to go peak traffic hours, it's a nightmare. And you don't want to live like where I do in the South area, which is south of Seattle, like Kent, Renton, Auburn, anything like that. Even though there's beautiful places to live, and I would actually say like one of the best places as far as like cost to live versus nice area, and right by a Costco would be like Bonnie Lake. That's where my cousin lives. But again, that would be a haul to go from there to the co-op. So if you're specifically trying to get yourself right near the co-op itself, Edmonds is where it's located. Linwood is probably the closest major Costco, or like I think there's one in Shoreline, which is a part of Seattle. But there you go. Hope that answers your question. Cool to know that you work for Costco. Costco's a fantastic company. They take really good care of their people. I love me some Costco. All right, back to actual fish-related stuff. But yeah, the big thing is going to be the financial side of it, because this area is getting atrocious to live in. So much so that the fact that I work 100% remote has made me ponder if it's worth moving in some reasonable point in time. But then I realize that it's going to be impossible to find anything that isn't also atrociously expensive, so I'm better off just staying where I am. How psychotic is that? Oh, that's a cool question from Mr. Littles. Have you been able to make any progress on setting up videos with your parents? Yes. So I think the next time my mother's in town is when I'm going to do one with her. And I recently talked to my dad. He was all in on doing a video talking about probably koi, because that was the thing that he was really into, but just how he got into fish. And maybe we'll talk some little bit about, fish memories when I was a kid. And he can like set the elaboration in my head of how things were when I was a kid versus how they were in real life. Because, in a kid, everything seems like massive compared to what it actually is. And I'll give you a story on this, a very short story. But I can remember going to this guy's house, not far from us. I think he lived like 15 minutes away from where we lived, where I grew up. And his garage, the way that I remember it, and I'm sure this is not correct, but it was like he had floor-to-ceiling tank. Like, not lines of normal tanks. I mean, like a tank that was floor to ceiling in each corner, like these massive ponds that he'd have to service from the thing above his garage. And like, I know that can't be true, right? That can't possibly be true, but he had tanks that were massive, and they were so massive to me as a kid that they seemed like they were that big. So in my head they are, right? And I'll have to ask him, because he might not remember that, to be fair. But, like, this random guy we bought some koi from, who I remember having very large tanks, and, like, his whole house was fish tanks, as I remember. He was just, like, an old guy that lived alone and loved fish. So, like, his whole house was just kind of a mini aquarium. He was kind of like if Lucas Bretz did big tanks, is the way I like to think about it. It was just... Is there space somewhere? Put a fish tank there. But yeah, kind of cool. Alyssa is advocating for the South End, which is where we both live, to come into Seattle for the cost, in which it is a lot cheaper to live the south of Seattle than it is the north. And yeah, she's in Auburn specifically, which is not terribly far from where I am in Kent. But also uh, it puts you closer to doing things like drives to Portland to like the Wet Spot tropical fish as well. And there's a few other like cool stores that are down south. But you know, I would argue that either Denny's in Kirkland or the Co-op are probably the two best shops that I know of. There's a shop I haven't gone to yet in Issaquah that's supposed to be very nice. Called, I think it's just called Aquascape, but it's a very aquascaping centric store. And then of course there's also Aquarium Zen in Seattle itself, which is like very beautiful shop, very cool place. It's certainly a place that I would say if you ever visit Seattle, you have to visit that place because it's just a super cool, super pretty shop. And it's very ADA centric, so there's a lot of beautiful aquascape tanks. There's just some cool, interesting niche things happening in that place. It's a neat little fish store. But if you live in here, you know, you might choose other places. Mostly because I think it's a pain in the butt to park there regularly. But I do like visiting aquariums then. It's a fun place. Jacob Hill, I think Corey made a video where he found the best pump for water changes because it never breaks and can even suck up sand and won't break. Yeah, so there you go. There's some examples. I recall vaguely the video you're talking about, but yeah. Good option if you do that. Pythons are a cheap way to do it too, but you can also just go to a hardware store, get yourself some good braided vinyl tube that fits a pump and work that way. I know a lot of people that swear by it, like Bob Steenfott does that, and Corey was doing that for a long time. I think he still does it that in some fashion like that, other than when he needs to do something other than his auto water change system, right? And you got tons of other fish keepers that do that kind of stuff too. I'm sure everyone in chat can name a different fish keeper on YouTube alone that does it, not just like, you know, Jim Bob that I know down the street who breeds guppies or whatever the heck, right? There's lots of people that do that stuff. Jeff Koski, my baby rainbow is about 1 3/4 inch. Nice. Yeah. Pretty soon, if you haven't already seen color start coming in, color is going to be coming in. Guaranteed. Well, I mean, okay, you might not have a lot of color and then it's probably female, but at that size, when you learn how to do it right, you can tell whether they're male or female by looking at their fins. So if you look up at the dorsal fin, right, they got that little bitty fin. It's just like kind of a little on-off flag, and then they got the big one on the rest of the back of their body. If this fin's long enough to overlap completely over this fin, usually male. If you see a gap or the fin stops and it looks like a fin, then fin, where it's really defined and not overlapping, female. You do it a few times, it becomes a little earlier. Too coolie for schoolie, another Loach fan. Thank you, I appreciate the sentiments for Danger Noodle. It's been a little rough, but yeah. I've been there for 12 years. I just want better water. Anywhere in like the Seattle or Tacoma metropolitan area has amazing water. We have some of the best water in the world. It's all glacier water. There's almost nothing in it, so you can basically fine-tune your water by buffering it however you want up. But if you like keeping things like discus and all your soft water fish, you inherently have like perfect water out of the tap. It's amazing. But for those of us who like our slightly more mineral-rich fish, we got to use a lot of like crushed coral and stuff like that to bring it up. But it's much easier to go up than it is to bring it down. That's the nice part about water chemistry, right? If you're in the Midwest, it's very hard to make soft, acidic water without something like an RODI unit. Where here, it's like TDS 28 out of the tap. You can bring that up very, very easily, but you get just phenomenally good water out of the tap in the Northwest, especially the Seattle area. It's beautiful glacier water. Tastes good too. That's the other thing. So, you never know. I'll say something stupid, but very truthful at the same time. You never realize like how nice just regular water is until you go somewhere else and the water tastes funky. And for those of you who like, maybe you live in really mineral-rich water and then you've gone maybe on vacation and your water tastes like way different, positive or negative, you kind of never realize that until you like go. And I'm very lucky. I've always lived in the Northwest, so like I've always had this very clean, good water that has like nothing in it. So there's nothing to augment its flavor or give it a little like metallic taste or I hate to say it, but there's like some, you know for those of you who've ever been out there, you ever had water where it has a kind of almost like broccoli water flavor to it? Does that make sense? Where it just tastes kind of funky, like it was the water in a steamer bag for your broccoli or something. I've had water that tastes like that, and I remember very distinctly being like, oh, I don't really want to have anything in bottled water here. But when I get home, I can go back to water out of the tap because it tastes good. It's so stupid, I know, but oh man, it's kind of amusing how much you can appreciate the simple things when something changes, right? Paul Soltero, since COVID hit, people who work from home realized they didn't need to live where they worked. The real estate market in this area went nuts with out-of-staters moving in. I'd be curious where you're at, Paul. I mean, it happened a lot of places, but in my case, in the test world, there's not a lot of remote-only positions. There's becoming more because they're realizing, like, unless you specifically need very high levels of security or you have a physical device that has to be interacted with and it has to be in a special environment, you can do test work from home. But at my previous job, I certainly couldn't. So I spent 2 years, honestly, my last 4 years of work in places where I would have had to be on site all the time. So I had to live somewhere near my work. But now in my current position, it's a little more possible. But that being said, I can't go off the top of my head and go this is the place I would move because I love this area so much. So that's the tough part is I kind of want to get away from how atrociously priced things are. But the only other places I would consider going, they're hit by the same problem. So I don't know. I'm kind of out of luck right there, you know? But who knows? Who knows? Place is getting usual. Oh, Omar's here. Good to see you, man. That man has a shop I want to go visit at some point. Just saying. Bob Purcell, in your opinion, what is the longest you should go between water changes in a Planet tank, assuming nitrates are staying in control? There's one other thing you want to pay attention to, Bob. And you'll want to pay attention to your carbonate hardness. And let me explain why. So as we go through the nitrogen cycle, right, ammonia getting converted into nitrite, and then nitrites being converted into nitrate, that steadily consumes your carbonate hardness. So, as long as we are buffering our water naturally or by just our top-off water is maintaining our KH as well as maintaining good low nitrate levels, we can, in theory, never water change. I still think it's a good idea to give your tank a water change every once in a while. But you could get to a point of where your tank is so stable and healthy where you're maybe only doing a proper water change once every 3 to 6 months. And you're just doing top-offs. But if a lot of fish, in general, have their breeding seasons based on rain, the rainy season. And we can simulate the rainy season through our water changes, right? The easiest way is when we're doing a big water change and we're bringing a lot of cooler water. Usually you want to do, for the fish that this matters, is especially the case with your plecos, your corydoras, a lot of your tetras, a lot of your Amazonian fish, right? Especially this is the case with them. The rainy season, that water comes down, it's a little cooler. So that we can kind of cheat the system. If we're, say, 78 degrees in our tank, we would bring in water at 72 degrees and do a 50% water change, right? The overall temperature is not going to go down that much. It's not going to be enough to shock your fish or anything crazy like that. But that light cooling and all of a sudden a bunch of fresh water coming in kind of triggers that instinct in their brain of hey, it's rainy season. And then if food is very prevalent as well, spawning happens. You start getting eggs, baby fish, whatever it may be. It's great. But if you're not worried about spawning specifically, and you just are more about low maintenance, as long as you're keeping on top of your filter health and making sure that your carbonate hardness is in check so that your pH doesn't crash and that your nitrates aren't going out of control, you basically don't have to water change. You just have to top off and keep your water levels good. A little bit of fresh water helps. Especially if you have water that has basically nothing in it, like the Seattle area. and you're buffering with like crushed coral and you can just monitor that, it's easy peasy. Connor Costello, what is your opinion on filterless setups? Have you ever done one? Sure. So I have. Yes and no. I have used a filter just for water flow. So I've used a hang on the back before with nothing in it just to move water around. And then had my plants do the work, if that makes sense. But I prefer some level of either, whether it's, air stones or some other movement. Like, I love having some churn at the top of my water because in general it just simulates parts of nature that matter for fish. Because even on lake bodies of water, there's enough air and wind that are churning that surface a little bit, right? Their natural habitats have something going on, even if it's a more static, and I put that in big quotation marks, body of water as opposed to, say, a river or stream system. So doing a little bit of that, having a little bit of flow is always going to help you. Do you need to have anything other than maybe just like a power head moving water around? Lucas Bretz did this plenty. He showed you don't have to have filtration in your tanks as long as you have plants in there doing that work, right? You have nature doing that work for you. But you don't want to go like too crazy on your stocking, or you want to make sure you're doing very regular water changes to help keep that system stable and safe. So it kind of comes down to filters allow us to prolong other types of maintenance, if that makes sense. Filters basically give us an area that supercharges the amount of beneficial bacteria to naturally process waste so that we either A, don't need a ridiculous plant load, or B, that we can let all those things go a little bit longer than we would without having to do water changes. I hope that makes sense. Because you can have some things go awry and things can get scary very fast on a filterless setup, where a filter allows us to have a little bit of kind of safety net, if that makes sense. They're not perfect. Nothing's perfect. There's no perfect solution. But certainly, you can do the filterless system. I personally choose not to. I like to add levels of redundancy. So, like, if my filter loses flow, I know my plants are doing work for a few days until I'm going to notice that and be like, oh, I can spend some time and spend that 20 minutes I need to service that filter. Right? And sometimes I can let that go for a week and it doesn't matter. As long as there's a touch of flow, the plants are doing the rest of the work for me. I got like air stones or maybe a sponge in there helping me out. Right? That's how I try to design a lot of my tanks. Rocky and Miles. I added a piece of Zoomed driftwood. So probably, if it's Zoomed, it's most likely Mopani, right? In a 10-gallon. And the next day, bacterial bloom. Took it out to soak 24 hours. Now did a water change. Water smelled weird. Ammonia spike. It said it was pre-soaked, normal. So I don't know if it was necessarily an ammonia spike, but what can happen, even with pre-soaked wood, right? Just pre-soaked usually means it's going to sink right away. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've gotten all of the tannins that wood is naturally going to release. And those tannins and things will naturally add extra stuff for bacteria to feed off of. Don't be too scared of bacterial blooms. They're usually not a negative thing, and they go away on their own after a few days. And you can use water changes to accelerate that process. I'm never terribly scared of bacterial blooms as long as I'm adding extra oxygen, whether it's through a sponge filter or air stone or whatever, right? As long as I have extra oxygen in there, I'm not worried about that bacteria consuming too much oxygen and causing issues for my fish. Bacterial blooms never scare me. Now, if you tested it and you saw an actual ammonia spike, that could be just because even though it's pre-soaked, you still have a big lump of decaying wood. The wood is going to slowly decay over time. Some woods do it faster. And now you've added this big chunk of material that doesn't have its own beneficial bacterial colony kind of keeping itself in check on all its surfaces. So it kind of adds a lot of extra detritus and stuff even at a very microscopic level, right, as stuff's moving in and out of the pores of the wood, you're getting little bits of tannins and humic substances into the water. All these things actually can be very, very healthy for your fish, right? Humic substances naturally create a kind of antifungal. That's why we like tannins. They're an antifungal naturally. But you can get little bacterial blooms and stuff like that, and then if there is all this extra stuff from your wood, it's going to get taken care of in a few days. You just got to kind of manage it through that period of time. And you're kind of doing a big water chemistry shift in a short period of time. I hope that makes sense and helps, but I wouldn't stress too much about that. Just make sure you're monitoring all your normal stuff, and as long as you don't see like a huge ammonia spike or nitrite spike, you should be fine. The bacterial bloom will go away in like a week at most, usually it's within a few days. And it's not going to hurt your fish. Or at least it shouldn't, put it that way. If things are happening to your fish, it's usually some other problem and not the bacterial bloom, per se. Ooh, chat jump. That's how we know I'm behind. Oh, Southeast North Carolina for Paul. Yeah. So, like, parts of North Carolina basically have the exact same weather as the Seattle area. So I could see why people would move out there. Little more, not necessarily rural per se, but, like, a little bit more property. Might be a little more spread out instead of, like, houses that are this far apart. That's what I hate. All the new houses they build out here, I swear they're, like, this close together. It drives me crazy, man. I wouldn't want to be that close to my neighbors. Even if I like my neighbors, I want a little bit of space. Jacob Hill, have you ever used North Fin fish food? Because I'm in Canada and it's almost every store here, but I've never used it. I've heard lots of people say lots of great things about North Fin. I tried. There's one North Fin I tried. I think it was just like a basic community formula. I'm forgetting the exact name of it. I'm trying to look it up. Yeah, it was just Community Flake from North Fin. It was all right. I didn't see anything super negative. It wasn't something where I was like head over heels with it, if that makes sense. Compared to some of the other foods I was using at the time. But it wasn't something where I was like, my fish just don't touch this. My fish ate it. I think I got like I got a small little thing of it, a little pouch. I remember that. It was not very much. I was just giving it a try. But I will say this. Anything that you know is made locally, in theory, it should be slightly better quality as opposed to, potentially something that's made in, say, China or something like that. But, yeah, I don't know. That's why I like Extreme. It's all developed here in the States, and it's all their work inside a fish farm that created all their foods. That's part of why I like it. But, yeah, I don't have anything negative or major positive. It's good to know that like they've got a good lockdown in all the Canadian fish stores, though. It's kind of like Tetra here in the U.S. Like Tetra is almost everywhere. Aquaballs. LA water is 350 parts per million. I use a Rode unit, change filters every 6 months. Oof. Well, a lot of that water comes in from somewhere else, doesn't it? Unless LA is like mostly well water, but yeah. Paul Sotero, in the Jersey Pine Barrens, the water was actually sweet. Ooh. That seems interesting. Like, the water up here is just, you can tell it's glacier water. In the sense that it's very, I hate to use crisp as the word, but crisp is the right word. Because it's just, there's nothing in it, basically. So it just has a very refreshing non-flavor. If that makes sense. I don't know, man. I've tasted water that tastes real weird and too minerally, and then I've had, like I said, the weird like broccoli water when I was traveling at one point. I was like, this stuff is disgusting. I'm drinking bottled water. And normally, like, I look at bottled water and I just shake my head because I live in the Northwest, so our water on tap's amazing. But some places I see where you need it. Mr. Littles, I've never lived anywhere where tap water was trusted without adding a filter. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Like, I don't want to get political, but man, so many parts of our country have, like, the infrastructure is just terrible, and it really, really needs to be addressed. Jacob Hill, I feel like Washington is just a good place to live if you keep fish. It's pretty phenomenal from a just perspective of there's a really strong club out here. There's lots of fish stores out here. Because we have a pretty strong, diverse culture in the Seattle area, you actually have a lot of cultures that are way more into fish than like more European culture tends to be generally, because it's more niche hobby in European culture, but like a lot of Asian cultures are way more into fish. So you actually have fish are far more prevalent out here than I think they are in certain places. But what I will say is the Washington area, like the East Coast, is great because almost all the conventions and really cool shows are out on the East Coast. It's like things like the Keystone Clash and all those kind of stuff. They're almost all on the East Coast. So if you want to start going to like conventions and stuff, as a Washingtonian, you've got to travel, just period. However, from a pure perspective of a really awesome club, lots of good fish stores, and keeping fish, it's pretty great. Plus, there's a bunch of us like, low-level fish tube nerds out here too. We all very regularly go to like Greater Seattle Aquarium Society events. There's a good number of us. Jacob Hill, the place I'm moving to soon has hard, mineral-rich water, which is great because I'm getting into African cichlids and live bears. Yeah, if you're keeping Africans here in Washington is a nightmare. Midwest, places with like nice liquid rock, perfect. Oh no. Lady Diana and Adele have the same problem. My well water at the farm smells like sulfur and tastes like a rusty Culver. Then Adele, our well water often tastes and smells like sulfur hellscape. Luckily, the pure filter makes it potable. Ugh. Yeesh. Naomi H2O, where else in the U.S. has soft water out of the tap? Just curious. Somehow I always assume most people have hard water out of the tap. So from my understanding, parts of New York are very similar in that they have fairly soft water. Interestingly enough, in talking to Dan at Dan's Fish, where he's at in Wyoming, has very, very soft water out of the tap. It's basically similar to ours, where they're getting mostly glacier and rain-based water, right, because they get a lot of snowfall and stuff, as opposed to necessarily well water. Other than that, it's mostly the Northwest, so like Oregon and Washington have really great water, but you start going anywhere else and you start getting into more of the mineral-rich waters where they're going to be a little harder out of the tap. I'm not too certain about most of the East Coast. I would assume that places like the Carolinas are a little different because you start getting toward areas where you have some more mountainy stuff, so you get a little bit more glacier-oriented water, but I'm not sure about how their infrastructure is built. Because like out here, right, in Washington, we've got lots of dams, we've tons of reservoirs that are using, because there's quite a number of mountains out here, and there's lots of different glacier systems that produce water for us in our watersheds. So I'm not sure. I don't know perfectly. I just know a few places. But I hope that helps answer the question, Naomi. I know not like your Minnesotas and stuff. Midwest is basically the nice, solid, mineral-rich stuff, which may or may not taste horrible. Dustin Perez. Water out of my tap is 300 plus ppm GH and KH, but after a week in my 20-gallon planted tank, the pH drops to 6.8 and GH goes low too, but KH stays the same. Any ideas why? Okay, so it depends, because in certain municipalities, water companies usually have to add certain things to their water to help protect the pipes from some of the things that are inherent to the water, to prevent like mineral scaling and things like that. And those compounds can temporarily boost your ppm, but as they settle or gas or get moved out through the gas process, they can drop down. I'm not. It would. that'd be something where I'd almost talk to your water company, if you have a water company specifically and not well water, and try to ask them if they can explain why you run into that, because that's going to be your best bet. When I had questions, I just called my water company. They told me a lot of things. They were actually very, very helpful people. And then I prefaced, was like, hey, so I use your water just as a heads up. I'm a fish keeper. I keep freshwater fish, like angelfish and tetras and stuff. And they were like, oh, okay. I didn't tell them exactly what I kept, but it was like, I keep this. I noticed like X happens this time of year, or, I see this in my water, and I looked at the water report. It doesn't seem like that would be. Could you tell me why? And then they were happy. They told me little stuff about how they do things in their system and gave me heads up basically to know what to pay attention to certain times of year. Rocky and Miles, thank you for the $4.99 super chat. Thanks. I feel less concerned now. Got a young honey gourami in the tank. She seems fine, but wasn't sure. Have a great night. Yeah. Don't stress bacterial blooms. They're not that scary. Don't stress those too much. Woo. Chat jumped. That's how you know I'm behind. Man, it's already 7. Time flies when you're babbling about fish, doesn't it? Doesn't it? It's one of the best parts about fish. Time just flies. Uh-oh, Alyssa. If I go get some safety Zorba tractor supply because I'm broke and need substrate, do you have a video explaining what I do with it to prime it with my existing liquid fertilizers? So my favorite video, let me see if I can track it down. One second. I gotta find it from, there it is. So this is actually my favorite video about specifically safety Zorb and about how to prime it. It's from a channel called Mischief and Fins, and he hasn't really done very much in a while, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he did some stuff like a year ago. But he has like one of the best videos on how to prime safety Zorb out there. And basically, whenever I do my own safety Zorb, I'll kind of remake this video. I'll directly rip it off. No, but more that I'll do something that might be a little easier in the sense of where to find some of the things he's using a little more simplistically. But yeah, I would do it basically like this. Really, all you need is calcium and magnesium to buffer the substrate. You don't necessarily need a lot of fertilizer itself. Because it will absorb stuff from your liquid fertilizers naturally. So you buffer it with the magnesium and calcium, which is basically your GH stuff, right? You give it general hardness, and that provides a lot of things that roots need the most. And then from there, you let your liquid fertilizers do the rest of the work. That would be what I would do. Personally. Helquin Jenna. Crisp and clean. Yeah, that's Washington water right there. Crisp and clean. Little sippy out of my water that I stole out of a cup for my lunch. Jeff Koski, around here the water is interesting. I'm in Wenatchee, other side of Washington, but we're in the more desert and mountain region. But however, you're probably right by a river. But if I go to the other side of the river in East Wenatchee, the water is so hard and tastes bad. It's really interesting the differences. So like, for reference, I have family live in Wenatchee, right? The differences between Wenatchee and East Wenatchee in their water is very interesting. Like my mom's place is way different than if you go to East Wenatchee, exactly as you're mentioning. And I'm not sure why it's like that. They have to be pulling their water from different places. Bob Purcell, I believe Baton Rouge has soft alkaline water. Oh, you know who also has really great water is St. Louis, Missouri. So Gary Lang is out there, and their water is very, very similar to Washington's water out of the tap. Very similar. It's like 2 degrees KH out of the tap, not very much general hardness, relatively easy, but yeah. Or at least that's what I've been told. Now Lady Diana is mentioning that she lives in the same suburb as Gary and has a TDS of 380. So that's interesting. Maybe it's just the KH is not too high, but it's, from everything he's ever told me, his water is fantastic for rainbow fish. So maybe that's the kicker. It has that mineral content that rainbow fish freaking love. They love some minerals. Johnny at Dance Fish is here. Fantastic. Sheridan, Wyoming. This is my first time living in this place with soft water. Yeah, it's interesting. I would have assumed, because I even remember talking to Dan about this, that Wyoming would be more mineral rich based on where you are. But no, turns out there's like almost nothing in that water, and it's great and amazing. So that must be wonderful. Must be wonderful. Granted, I'm in Seattle, so I shouldn't make it out like I don't have good water. I feel bad for the folks that have to do a lot of work with their water. I know that I would lose my mind if I had to. Jeff Koski. Also, they are different counties. Yeah, I keep forgetting that those are different counties. It's I can only keep track of so many things in my poor brain. Alyssa Bentley, aragonite and Epsom salts. I mean, pretty much that'd be about the easiest way to do it. But you can get basically powdered calcium and magnesium, fairly cheap, that does the same thing through like Amazon. So that'd be all I do, is I just give people links of a couple different ways to do it. Adele, I get ads for programs to build wastewater treatment plants. I am not in the water treatment profession. I blame my Google searches in water chemistry to deal with my hell water. So, okay. I'll tell a short story. It'll probably be the last thing for tonight. But, oh, okay. So very similar, right? You have me, my lady, and brother-in-law James that all live in my house, right? And because we're on the same ISP, our search histories will kind of augment the random commercials that we get through some of the streaming television services that my TV gets downstairs. So I just have like a Samsung TV, and it has its own built-in like Samsung TV Plus or whatever the heck they call it. And they have a few channels that my lady likes to put on just as background noise, one of which is Kitchen Nightmares, because we're Gordon Ramsay fanatics. But anyway, so you get some very random commercials there. And we can kind of tell when a certain person in the house has been doing more searches than normal, because the advertising on the TV changes to be stuff that person would look up. So there was a time when we were getting a bunch of API commercials of all thing, like, you know, API the fish company, right? And it was when I was doing a bunch of research for a couple videos. So I was looking up a bunch of things, and basically it just was like, all these aquarium searches. Well, this is the only aquarium company commercial we have queued. They must be interested in it. Serve that commercial to their TV. And so I remember I was sitting downstairs after breakfast on like a Saturday, and I was spending some time with my lady and Papa Limo, and we're getting ready to go do some errands for the day, me and brother-in-law James. And this API commercial comes on the TV, and I'm sitting there talking to her, and I just hear this it's a terrible commercial. It's like the worst marketing I've ever heard in my life. And I remember doing this kind of like did you just get an aquarium commercial on the TV? And she's like, oh yeah, I've been getting those for the last like week. And I just started busting up laughing, because I realized it was from me doing a bunch of searches up here on my computer, and it finally going like, oh, we bought this data from Comcast, probably, and they're apparently very interested in aquariums. We better give them this commercial. Because there's like a couple different API ones, and they all suck. They're all terrible commercials, because it's like the API brand, and it's like, what? No one cares about the API brand. Tell me what the product is. You dummies. It kills me, dude. Bob Purcell, did you get 542 different seed chem fertilizer product commercials when you made that video? I'm surprised I haven't got like some level of message about like, hey, you've got our product line completely wrong or something like that. But I'm probably too small a fish for seed chem to care about. They're a giant company. They're enormous. Oh, good times. All right. I'd be curious if you guys. I'm hoping that like the replay crew, you get this far, and I get some interesting comments down at the end of this video. For like the random commercials you get because of someone else's search history in your house. Anyway, gang. First, again, thank everyone so much for your condolences with Danger Noodle. I really appreciate it. I'll probably do something interesting for Danger Noodle in the near future. If you're a member, there is a recent post on the community tab that's for members only temporarily. Please, if you haven't already responded to that, go take a look, respond to it, leave a comment for me just so I know. And then other than that, gang, be here next Tuesday. All the usuals. Video coming out this Saturday. Should be an interesting start to a new product testing experiment. You got some fun stuff in to play with. So hopefully you guys like that. It'll be kind of just a short intro, and then I'll be doing testing for the next several months on this. But with that being said, guys, that's why voice goes out at the very end. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome. We're only like a month away from when I get to like go hog wild about the Triple Crown. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to lose my mind. But I hope to see some of you there. Yeah.